last session. So I think that Dave and I have agreed with, he'll probably do about a 45-minute more teaching, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. And officially, we are set to finish at 1:30. Dave's okay to go a little bit over that, so if we go a little bit beyond time and you know that you've got a commitment and need to leave, I don't think either Dave or I will feel at all bad about if you have to get up and go. So if you need to leave at 1:30, but if we go over, it's just simply so there's a bit more time for questions before we conclude. So feel free to just jot down something that you might like to ask, and that would be great. Now, the reason I wanted to come back and just intro this session before Dave comes back and shares with us is that you would have heard clearly that Dave says that KI is primarily funded from Paladin, his own company, and that is about a $3 million exercise per year, which is pretty astounding in itself, isn't it? There is no charge for today, and that's because that's consistent with KI and how they do things, and it was our desire to do it that way anyway. But what I have done is on the table just inside the door there is an FPOS machine, and on that table and the table out in the foyer on that side and the table just as you leave on this side, there are the church's bank account, my church's bank account details, Expression Church. If you would just love to say, look, I want to honor the man for his time, I want to contribute into KI, any offerings that will be given will go directly to KI. They will not be used by Expression Church. It's our privilege to be able just to pass them on. So you think, wow, I got value from today. Why don't you just get your phone as you leave, take a photo of the bank account, and let's just honor the man of God by saying, look, we got something from this. We'd love to contribute towards what KI are doing. So there will be no offering taken, but if there are bins or buckets on the outside as you leave, and the church's bank account's there, just take a photo, and all money will go through to Dave. Why don't we put our hands together as he comes back now?
Okay, thank you, ladies and gents. All right, so my only governing factor is airplane, so I have to catch the plane this afternoon or I'll get shot tomorrow. So otherwise I'd stay as long as needed, okay? But what I'll do is I'm going to cut a whole lot of stuff short, but basically you've heard a lot of my testimony and so on, all revolving around assignment and the two main criteria that we should be understanding to find our own assignments. Over the years at KI, we've done Finding Your Assignment seminars, which is like a whole Saturday, and we get speakers together, we get 3 speakers, and they, one by one, each one gets an hour to deliver a talk to the audience to explain how they found their assignment. You've just heard how I found mine, or part of it, and then the Lord added to it. I don't have time to go how He added to it today, but I'm just going to tell you a bit of a conclusion to it. So what we do is we have one person will talk about that, and then the host would then do a few little exercises. Okay, write down your passions, or write down what you hate, or whatever, you know. And then the next person talks, and then it's lunchtime, and then the third person talks. And in between, there's all these little exercises, all to encourage you to help find your assignment, because some people struggle with it. And then once the 3 people have spoken, then we have a panel. So all 3 sit on the panel, and you can interrogate them for an hour. And then after that, we have prophetic. So prophetic people will be out the front, and you can line up and try to get a prophetic word to get confirmation. And amazingly, the success rate is over 70% of people who come out of there. And when you see Christians doing their assignment in the marketplace, guys, and doing it God's way, the whole world changes for them and their communities. My objective here is to sow the seeds for you to change your community. Okay, create a just community and a just city and a just province, just nation, because we can't stay goat nations. We don't have that option. So that's the reason I've stopped here. I'm kind of in transit. I wish I had the day and half the evening to teach a whole bunch more, because I can only sow seeds. But you can, if you want more of this stuff, you can join Kingdom Investors. It is a membership site, okay, it's $20 a month, but in there is tons and tons of stuff, and I'm not here for a money grab. That's just, I actually battled with my staff about that, but never mind. Anyway, most people love it, so you can go, the whole genre of our teaching and lots of it is on there, and every month we add to it. We do webinars. You can come on any webinar. We do one for the Eastern and Western hemispheres, because we have members from all over the world. and we will be opening up online chapters of KI because I can't travel anymore, it's too much. So I know that Tauranga is going to open an online chapter where they will just take a lesson every month. They'll get together in a room like this. I think they've got lots of people already interested, and they will do like we do a chapter of KI. They'll do it, but the teaching that I would teach is done online, and then they'll have a guest speaker and all the networking and food and everything else that goes with it. Okay, and we can actually quantify then how many people join, because the people will join the KI for their $20 a month. And then in that process, and this is what I'm going to explain, the little conclusion to this part of the lesson, but we need to quantify how many people in our community are becoming Christians, and Christians that are doing stuff the way that we should be doing stuff in the marketplace, because you will reach a tipping point when you suddenly tip the whole community over to doing stuff our way. So keep that in mind, because we can do this through this website. So I'll just finish this bit, then I'll explain that, and then you can interrogate me after. I'm not going to get through the rest of the stuff, I don't think. We can try. So remember, I said the Lord gave me this business in 2011 to do this Sheep Nation, and I was, why me, Lord? Again, not in a cheeky way, but in an investigative way. Lord, why would you want me? Gideon, like, why me? You know, I'm the least of my people, etc., etc. So I needed to know why me as part of my spiritual due diligence, because I need the confidence to know that God's in this, and it's not some Gibeonite ruse taken, because we get led by our soul really easy. If I had my way, I'd be running a jet ski ministry, okay? Not KI. All right, so the Lord showed me why, because you have a large business, you have a massive audience, you understand assignment, you've had all the life's training, you've had all this stuff, and it's became pretty obvious. And then I was saying, Lord, but why Australia? You know, where am I going to do this? My mindset, everything happens in the US, the center of the planet in their mind. So, you know, must be the United States. And the Lord saying, no, Australia. You do it in Australia. And this is before I understood you could narrow it down to community level and so on. So I'm thinking Sheep Nation, ethnos, the entire ethnic Australian group, okay? And in that process, the Lord showed me why. And he showed me that because Australia is such an important nation on this earth, okay? We are the 12th economy in the world, which is unbelievable, just behind Russia. Massive, massive economy. One of only 8 AAA-rated economies left on the planet. We're the 5th most traded currency in the world. Our banks are amongst the biggest in the world. They're just about always in the top 20 safest banks in the world. They're just about always in the top 20 most profitable banks in the world. The Commonwealth Bank of Australia is far greater. The market cap is far greater than all the German banks combined, including Deutsche Bank. Okay, so it's an unbelievable place, Australia. It's prominent in the UN at that point in time. It had just finished being the head of the UN Security Council, which is very rare. It's the closest ally to the world's greatest power. It's a world leader in many sports except rugby union, which doesn't matter. And many other domains. We're a major provider of the world's education. You know, we're one of the biggest countries on earth. I think we're the fifth biggest country in the world with most massive resource deposits, etc., etc., etc. And yet we are only 24 million people. It's not hard to convert 24 million people. It is much harder to convert the EU or the United States with 365 million people. The world needs a benchmark. They need an example, proof of concept. Okay, so if we can, this is how you reach a tipping point. So the statistics say, and there's books on it and everything, that if you reach 10% of a community, you can change the 10%, just like they do the slave trade. Okay, sustained campaign of public persuasion. They eventually just pulled the rug out from the whole of the British Empire's economy by saying you will now pay for your labor. You got rid of the slave trade, okay? Massive things can be done if you do it carefully. So to reach a tipping point, you've got to reach 10% of the population. In almost every Western country, it's a little bit different in the third world, but in almost every Western country, the engine room of the nation is your SMEs, your small to medium enterprises. When you're dealing with business people, you don't need to reach 10%. You can get between 5 and 6% because they have different mindsets to mum and dad and employees and so on. So, if the SMEs are the engine room of the nation, we need to influence the engine room, which is my natural audience, okay? Business people. In order to tip the business people over, because we're talking communities, okay, a tipping point changes a community. So I know that we have 2.3 million small SMEs in Australia. Okay, 1/10 of our population owns a business. It's amazing. And that's my audience. And I lecture to tens of thousands of them all the time, Christian ones and secular ones. So to change their mindset, those 2.3 million, I only have to reach 125,000 people. And that will tip the SMEs over. And the SMEs are the engine room of the economy of the nation. And that will change the nation. Okay? So that's why I say it's entirely doable. And that was when I was bleating to the Lord and saying, why me and why this and why that and why Australia? That's what he showed me. And that's a strategy. It's not just random Christianity. Let's randomly send the missions over there because, you want to convert Africa or there's orphans or whatever. That's all awesome stuff, but there's no strategy in that. We must deal with the root cause of the problem, go after the tap that's running, the greed and the self-centeredness, prove the opposite, and as we prove the opposite, everybody will do it. Why wouldn't you do it that way? Keep in mind, right in the beginning I said, if we don't do it, there's an insurrection. So it blows up every 80 to 100 years. It should have blown up in 2007. The only reason it didn't blow up is because it was manipulated. It was unsustainable debt right through the banking system. Should have blown up. I'm an international financier. I'm always onto that. I know what's going on in the world banking system. That's my world. Okay, and it was more debt was put into it to fix the problem of debt. So it's coming back to roost. Okay, it will come back. It always does. And so this is the whole thing, and it's all centered around greed and self-centeredness. If we can prove the opposite, look after people, prosper them, and so on, why wouldn't even those greedy perpetrators of that do it? Because they then get rid of the threat of it blowing up. This is the whole philosophy behind the Jubilee trading cycles. It was to reset the national debt clock every 50 years, at least once in everyone's lifetime. And yet we don't do it. Okay, and we should do it. If we watched the times and knew what was going on, we would do it. But if we don't do it, it's still a spiritual principle. It's always going to happen. We will always borrow too much out of greed, and someone will always lend us too much out of greed. Okay, so it's always going to blow up. So the point is, if we fix that, and we, the Christians, should be ready when that happens. We missed it in 2007. I was lecturing on it and pleading with people, get cashed up. I'm jumping around a bit because I'm just trying to squeeze in as much as possible. But there needs to be a transformation of wealth from the wicked to the just. Not to the Christians, okay, to the just. Lots of Christians are not just. That's why I said right in the beginning. So from the wicked to the just. Let's assume we are just. How is that transformation going to happen? Think about it. Physically, it's going to happen physically. It doesn't rain money anymore. Manna's gone. Okay? So it's going to either happen through war or economic downturn. Let's have economic downturn. What a pleasure. Let's do it. But in the process, we will end up with the wealth that then gets in the right hands and people are managing it and looking after everybody. It's just a transformation of wealth. That's what should happen. And it's such an orderly way to do it during economic downturn. If we are cashed up, if we are just. So remember, we're all sinners. The Bible says that, but it doesn't give us license to sin. It just says we have a propensity to sin. That's why Jesus was born the virgin. We passed it down. He wasn't. Okay? So at the end of the day, we have a propensity to sin, but we have an avenue for forgiveness to get out of it. We shouldn't be wallowing in it, and we need to take sin so much more seriously so that we can be just when the time comes for the transformation of wealth and be ready and understand how to do it. You can't go and buy distressed companies and plunder the place. We've got to bring the distressed people in and show them God's way. We will all prosper if we do that. I'll give you one example of that shortly. Okay, so because it's an important country, the world would use it as a benchmark. How did you get rid of homelessness? How did you get rid of the unfunded liabilities? How did you do that? Funny you ask, let me show you. If it was some ratty little country in Central America like Guatemala, no one would even care. No one would take any notice. But if it's a 12th economy, they would listen. Okay? So really important, and that's why and then I needed confirmation. I'm always interested in confirmation about what's going on. And so I said to the Lord, you know what, the last time this happened, you showed me Solomon did it and you gave him all the wisdom and all the wealth and stuff. Can I have some of that? Because I need wisdom and wealth to do this stuff. I'm like nobody. And I felt the Lord saying, in due course as needed. 3 weeks later, I was in a place called Big Bear, just outside of LA. And I went there. It was a massive conference, over 100 speakers. And I went there incognito. They never knew I was coming. I wasn't to be a speaker. I snuck in. I sat right at the back where I'm nice and comfortable. And the first guy gets up and he delivers an awesome message, Dr. Miles, and he gives an awesome message. And then the host says, can you please prophesy over the whole meeting before we start? And he's waiting there and he just gets up and he says, Dave Hodgson, are you here? And it's over 100 speakers. I'm not a speaker, so imagine how many people there are. Whole boards, lots, so many. And he says, And so I thought, oh, here we go. So he's come down, please. So, okay, he knows me, but he didn't know I was there. Okay, he spoke at KI many years ago. So now he grabs me by like a fireman's lift on both arms, and he's waiting, and Bruce Cooks and John Bruce says, hey, hurry up, the schedule of 100 speakers. So he says, you know what, I don't know how to say this, and he said, but the Lord is showing me that you will control almost as much wealth as Solomon, and we must have lunch together. That's what he said, in a microphone. And so everyone, America, they're whooping and yahooing, but for me, it's confirmation of the sheep nation, okay? It's confirmation of what I've been told. And we had lunch together straight after that, and he said, do you know what this is? Do you know where it's coming from? Do you know what it's for? I said, I know what it's for, I know what it is, and you know what? I told him the story, I said, I don't know where it's coming from, it'll come from transaction, we'll do it. So that was just my confirmation. We launched it in 2013 across the Kingdom of Esther's chapters in Australia, and it was the most amazing thing that happened. Everybody came under it. From the first lecture onwards, it just spread. Everyone's talking about it. So next time we did KI, one Thursday night here in Melbourne, one in Perth. By the time we got to Perth, it's packed. And the most amazing things happened. Everyone's there. And we asked for a show of hands. Who's Catholics? There's all the hands. Who's the Brethren? There they are. Who's the chandelier swinging Pentecostals? Who's this? Who's that? 26 denominations in the one meeting. Some of them have got 18. There's just no discussion on doctrine. No one gives a rat's about doctrine. It's a national vision. We're going to fix all these issues. And the business people just come together and they think, wow, it's now suddenly got meaning to their faith. And they just become the engine room of the sheep nation. Even Muslims got saved. They came by mistake. There's so much... In Western Australia, the team there that put it on, they got this thing, they stick an ad in the paper, business networking, and it's a migration city, obviously, on the west coast there. So this extended family comes, Muslim, with adult children, and they think it's business networking. They forgot to say it was a Christian deal, So they're filling up the front row, and I don't know people, so I'm just rabbiting on. We start off with prayer, and they just freeze, and they're looking around, but they were polite, so they sat there. I think they just came from Pakistan. They were immigrants. And so they sat through it, but at the end of it, they loved it. And they came up and they said, wow, that was amazing. And I don't know who I'm talking to, but anyway, they disappeared. Next month, they came back with another extended faith, all immigrants. And then the next time the pastor, because we're in the church the third time, the pastor picks it, he gets an email from God, and straight over and gets them all saved. Now they take up all the front rows. And they're monotheistic, zealous people. When you don't convert them, they kick us in the butt. So it's amazing what happened, is my point. And everyone got behind it. So as I was saying just beforehand, you can work out the statistics. You can say to yourself, okay, I know how many SMEs there are in Auckland or whatever it might be in the community in Auckland. This is how many SMEs there are. If we can get 6% of those to come under the way we talk about, join KI, whatever it is, and learn the way we trade and learn how to prosper, learn how to build big companies, learn why, and so on, increase our influence and influence, you will see a change of culture in the marketplace. And it's a strategy. It's not a random thing. We know how it works. We've done it. We are 10 years ahead of the whole world. Lance Wallnow said to me one day, we're sitting on the Gold Coast, and do you know Lance Wallnow? Have you heard of him? Yeah. Okay. So he's an awesome dude, and he will be the first guy to say what he teaches is theory. They don't do it in the States. He said to me one day, you guys are the only people in the Western world that do the stuff that we teach. And he said, the Southeast Queensland is the center for marketplace ministry in the world. That's what he said to me. And that was a long time ago. It was 8 years ago. Okay, so I'm not big noting us, and it's not me. There's quite a lot of it. It's quite concentrated. But the point is, we're actually doing it as a strategy. There's no other strategy anywhere. I lecture all over the world all the time, and everyone is saying, "Wow, that sounds like we can actually do that. Physically, we can do that." So it's entirely doable. What we want to do is create a thing called a KIBN, which is a KI business number. In Australia and most countries, I suppose you have to have a BN. In Australia, it's an ABN. If you want to do business, you register your ABN and it becomes part of your tax file number and so on and so on. So a KIBN will mean people will do a course. They'll be members already, but in part of their membership for $20 a month, they'll do a course, and in there, that course will qualify them for a KIBN, which means they get a business number, go onto an international register, and there will be millions of them around the world. And if you want to do business with anybody that's ethical, they have a KIBN, then you'd look on that register, and your name would be there if you did it. And then at the end of the day, you would know that if you had 6% of your SMEs in your community at KIBNs is going to tip over. You're going to end up fixing your social distress. You're going to fix up the suicides. You're going to help domestic violence. We have all sorts of strategies how to do this stuff, and churches will be funded off the planet, and so on. Okay, so that's what we are up to. I just want to finish off with something before we talk, because I want to, everything we do should be what Jesus was doing in the marketplace. And I don't think Christians really know a lot about Jesus, the guy on the ground. I think we take a lot of moral stories about the New Testament and so on, and that's awesome, it's great. But do you realize that on the ground, he identified the same issues that I'm talking about, and he strategically went after those issues, okay? So if we have a little look at him, let's take him when he's 12 years old. He's lost, like his parents have lost him for 3 days. They come back and they find him in the temple, and he's busy talking to the priests there. And they say, what have you been? And he's kind of like, why did you ask? I'm here about my father's business. So that word business, it means about my father's concerns. Literally translated into concerns, not business, buying and selling goods and services, but concerns. Like, it's my business, none of your business, that kind of stuff. So he's talking, he said, I'm here about my father's concerns. Now, his father, our Father God, had massive concerns about first century Palestine, okay? It was an absolute basket case. It was a savage, brutal, desperate, very, very violent world that Jesus was born into. Physically, it was off the planet. More than 90% of the Jews were totally feudalized to the priests, okay? So their land was owned by the priests. They were starving, and they were starving to death. Their children were dying. And that's 90% of an entire nation, by the way. That's what's happening actually in Guatemala at the moment. 94% of the nation live under the poverty line. Last year, 78% of the whole country lost more than 20 pounds in body weight due to hunger. Anyway, that's what happens through greed. But these people had been plundered of what little wealth they had. They'd been dispossessed of their land by the priests. The priests were totally crooked. The temple priests and the elite class, the aristocracy, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, all of this lot, totally corrupt. All of them working for the Romans. That was the social infrastructure that was going on. And they plundered the people through the taxation system. Okay, so every time they now have to go and give their offerings at the Feasts of Ascension and so on, obviously they've got to come there and they've got no money, they've got nothing, so they have to borrow the money from the priests so they can go and buy the animals. The priests charge them massive interest, which was illegal in their system, but they still did it. And then the priests know that they take the land for security. Remember, their land is where they get their food. There's no Woolies and Coles and stuff in those days. You've got to have land to eat. Okay, so, and now they take the land as security. They know that next year when they come back, they're not going to be able to pay, so the priests get the land. And now they are feudalized, enslaved to the priests. And they were so hungry and starving. The nation was medically sick. The children were being sold to the temple and all over the place so the children would survive. The trafficking was off the planet. And God's value system is children, children's children. Whenever there's trafficking, he's not smiling. Big problem, okay? So that's what is going on at the time. Now, whenever there was any opposition to this oppression, because don't forget, put all of that together and then dump the Roman occupation on top of that, is kind of everyone's, the human spirit is starting to rebel. So there was a lot of opposition. Lots of people stuck diadems on their head and said, I'm the Messiah. I'm coming to save the nation. And they took on the Romans and they took on the Jewish priests, and all of them were slaughtered. And typically, whenever that happened, the Romans react and they just plunder and burn and murder through the region. Now, that's exactly what happened in about 10 AD, in about 6 AD, when Jesus was 10 years old. So consider, Jesus born, he lives in Nazareth. Nazareth is a small little town, quite poor, about 100 families. It's about 4 kilometers from the regional city of Sepphoris, okay? This guy, Judas the Galilean, he rises up as a bandit. A leste was the word they call him, leste. You remember the two guys crucified next to Jesus? We often think that they were common criminals. Well, they weren't. They were leste. It's written that Tachilus on their plaques was leste. They were bandits. They were rising up. They were freedom fighters, okay? Anyway, at the end of the day, this guy, Judas the Galilean, he rises up. He goes into Sepphoris and he raids the Roman armory, kills the Roman soldiers with his gang, steals the weapons, goes back out into the bush, and he goes and he's murdering everybody that's pagan, uncircumcised. Romans react in typical form. A whole legion arrives. They just kill all the people around the area. They go into Sepphoris. They burn the city to the ground. Thousands of Jews are killed. They auction off all the women and the children. And then they crucify 2,000 men. 2,000 men in one day outside the gates of what was left of the city. Everybody had to come and watch because it's a deterrent. They crucified the less day. That's where crucifixion comes from and why they did it, as a deterrent. Everyone had to come and watch. Jesus was 10 years old. He has to come and watch. The whole family has to come and watch. So think about it. What is your kid? What are you going to think watching 2,000 people screaming and bleeding and crying and stuff getting crucified? That would have formed a massive impact on his head, on his brain, and on his strategies. 2 years later, he's in the synagogue outside the temple saying to those priests, what are you up to? What are you doing? You're plundering your own people. This is what's going on physically. Remember I said right in the beginning, we've got to put it in the context of what's going on the ground. This is going on, okay? This is why when Jesus was born, as he's being born, the shepherds, the angels come and say he's going to bring peace and goodwill and joy to all mankind. Peace in the Jewish mind is not just the absence of war. Peace means a wholeness in mind, body, and estate to such an extent that you feel compelled to give back. That's what shalom means. Jesus is bringing that to these totally poor people, and that's why Herod got so ticked off. I can't have that. I need these people to stay poor. I'm plundering them. I don't want them to get rich and be able to give back. You need to get rid of it. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on. I don't have time for all that. But anyway, the point being that is what Jesus is saying to these priests. So you need to understand, guys, that at 12 years old, Jesus is a man. Okay, the fact that children are still 12 is a relatively new concept. In those days, it was pre-bar mitzvah. Bar mitzvah, becoming a man at 13 only came later than this. Moses left the house of Pharaoh's daughter when he was 12. Samuel was called when he was 12. Solomon rose to the throne and gave his judgment. That first judgment, those two ladies fighting over the baby, and he said, cut it in half, have half each, he was 12. Josiah made all of those reforms, he was 12. So my point is Jesus is socially, physically and socially mature enough, acceptable for him to challenge the priests at that point in time. So he's not sitting there saying, showing the priests how wise he is like we think. The priests are thinking, dude, this guy could be a problem. He knows a bit too much. Not all the priests were crooked. Some of the smaller synagogues were great. But the temple was just so corrupt. Okay, so what does he do? What's happened? So let's see what he did. So he starts his ministry later on, following in the footsteps of John the Baptist. John the Baptist, repent, you vipers. John was going straight after those leaders and say, you guys must change your ways. Why are you plundering your people? So Jesus did that. He started off doing that. And straight away knows. Now, don't forget, his mindset has been formed, all right? When he was 10, he's lived this whole thing all these 30 years. And now all of a sudden he's saying to these leaders, you guys must change your ways. Stop plundering your people. They need money. They need food. They need medical aid. The nation is medically sick. And he can see they're not going to change. Okay, and they didn't change. And so, and there's a lot more in that. But the fact is, they weren't going to change. So he took a different tack. He formed a strategy, the same as we have to form a strategy. And he said, I am going after this corruption. I'm going to shut down the revenue to the temple. That is how we will fix this thing. I'm going after the greed, the heart of this thing. I'm going to teach them caring and sharing in the marketplace. And that will make people prosper. The love of Christ in the marketplace is caring and sharing. Okay, it's not big huggies and kissies, all right? That too, if you like. But the philosophy is we need to change this culture that's killing people, all right, plundering people. So the first thing he does is go after the tax collectors. That's why he said, Levi, come, we need to have dinner together, me and you. And when people in ancient times had dinner together, it meant they were of one accord. Levi becomes Matthew. Over 100 tax collectors and assistant tax collectors all had dinner with Jesus that night. The impact on the temple revenue was massive. Okay, and the priests are sitting up saying, well, what is going on? All of this wealth is being funneled through these tax collectors up to the temple, take a big margin, send the rest up to Rome. Rome did that all over the empire. They formed allegiances with the landed aristocracy and said, you plunder your people, we'll all prosper. Us, but not your people. Okay, and people are so greedy they will plunder their own people to please the Romans and have all the wealth. And that's what was going on. So he starts doing that. Zacchaeus as well. Obviously, Zacchaeus is just as important as Matthew. Matthew wasn't only a tax collector, he's a customs agent, all the stuff coming through that alleyway up to the north, and so on. So he's plundering everybody, and so is Zacchaeus. And Jesus says, come, Zach, you and me, we need to talk again. Let's go and have dinner at your house. Okay, exactly the same thing. Changed his heart, changed his whole... He said, come, I need to abide at your house. To abide at your house doesn't mean we're going there for lunch, okay? In the Jewish mind, it means the house of Zacchaeus, the house of Hodgson, the house of MacDonald, the house of the Lord, the house of David. It means your estate, your extended family. I'm going to put my spirit of caring and sharing, Zacchaeus, into your heart. Okay, and that's exactly what he did. And Zacchaeus comes back out of that in Luke 19 and says, wow, I have really stuffed this up. And I now know that if I look after you, people of Jericho, because now you're so poor, wealth is now finite, I'm finding it really hard to tax you to keep the Romans happy. But if I prosper you, you'll be so much more, I can tax you legitimately. And you will be hungry, you'll be full and fat and awesome. Okay, and so he did. He gave back what he had taken from them. Then he gave them 300% more, total 400% back. And then he said, from now on, so that's their seed capital, that's everything to get you guys going. And now 50% of everything I ever make in future, I'm going to give to you, which is vast wealth to people who have nothing. And with that, we can all trade with each other and wealth becomes infinite. So he's just demonstrating all this stuff. Okay, so he's got the tax collectors now who are now shutting off the revenue to the temple. Now there's other revenue streams. People are being charged exorbitant rates to get healed. So he heals them for free. He says, come, let's heal. Go and show the priest that I healed you for nothing. Okay? And so I'm not saying we have to do work for nothing. This is just a strategy to trash the corruption that was going on. These guys, he says, go to the temple and pay what you're supposed to pay, which is really cheap because the way God structured it. So they all do that. And this is another revenue stream to the temple that's collapsing. Then he starts healing, then he starts forgiving people for free. Not allowed to do that. Only the priest can do that. And they've ramped the prices up. So now they're getting forgiven for free. There's a whole strategy thought out carefully and planned. Okay? And then he says, now I need to fix these crooked money changers. These clowns are actually ramping up the prices every time these people come to change money. And they have to change money. They come from the outer reaches of the empire to the feasts. You can't bring your cows as offerings. By the time they get there, they're skinny. If they haven't been rustled and butchered along the way, they're not fit for offering. So you bring money. Money has pagan insignia of Julius Caesar and other creatures on there. It's not acceptable as an offering. So you have to exchange it into the Tyrian coins, which are acceptable. And they ramp up the rates and they fleece everybody. And then they have to take those new coins and go to the people selling the animals, and they ramp up the prices and fleece them. These are poor people getting fleeced again and again, right in the very center of the religion. It's a temple-based Judaism. That's where God lives, in the Holy of Holies. And go there and get fleeced by God is the mindset. Okay? So this whole thing, Jesus is changing. So he goes into the temple and he gets amongst the money changers in the courts of the Gentiles, which is the first court where everybody could go into. And he says to them, you guys are a den of thieves, you guys are bad news. And you know what? If you consider the money changers had these massive imposing timber benches. It took like 5 or 6 men to carry them. They're called benches, banca. It's where the word bank comes from. It's an old Latin word. It's literally where the word bank comes from. In the drawers, which were lockable, is all the gold and stuff. Jesus goes in there and he just turns them over on his own. Okay, he turns these things over. In those days, when a money changer went broke, they had to turn the benches over. 4 or 5 people lifted it and turned it over. And that signified when you went in, don't go there to that guy because he's broke. And the term that they used was ruptured. It's where the word bankrupt comes from. Jesus bankrupted the money changers. Deliberate strategy. Okay? What's that going to do to the temple priests? Okay? And then he forms a whip and he goes after these other crooked clowns who are now selling the doves and so on. The whole strategy is to deal with the social distress, going after the root cause of the problem is what we should be doing, okay? And then the major and the ultimate sacrifice, where the crucifixion and the resurrection, he gives of his whole body to do this thing. And what happens during that process? The veil in the temple is torn. Okay, that's where the crooked priest would go into Holy of Holies. No one else he can say whatever he wants when he comes out of it. Oh, God said ramp up this and ramp up, we've got to charge more for that, No longer can that be done. No longer. When they tore that was the end, really, that was the end of temple Judaism. Okay, the temple was trashed another 35 years later by the Romans, but still it lost its power completely. People could now completely bypass the corruption. No more animal offerings. You go straight to the Father boldly before our God and go and get forgiven there yourself. Go and make your offerings there yourself. So you can bypass this crooked structure. And that was the strategy that Jesus did on the ground. We're talking marketplace perspective, okay? Physical stuff. That's what's going on. It gives us the model. What are we doing today? How will we create a just community in Auckland or Tauranga or wherever we are? And ultimately a sheep nation in New Zealand. Okay? So that is the sort of food for thought that I'm giving you guys today, because we're sort of nearly out of time. What time did we say finish? 2? Pardon? 1:15. It's 1:15. Okay. So, question time, guys. I haven't done half of what we should have done, but never mind. Time is time. So would you like to ask me any questions? Feel free. Ask me war stories if you want. I don't mind talking about anything. Just don't know what's happened to my computer. Sorry?
You're going to teach now.
No, we'll do question teaching will come out of that.
Okay, so we're going to do some questions. Where's my young friend Joseph? He's probably the fittest man in the room. I might get you to run the microphone round so we can hear the questions. Is that right? Is this my time to advertise your business or anything like that? We'll run so you look like you. So look, if you just put your hand up, Joseph will come to you and give you the mic if that's all right, and so we can all hear the question. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Dave, for everything you shared this morning. Just thinking about the banks, and obviously today in the world, the banks are, the most corrupt institutions on the planet. Making everyone slaves.
You've probably got a flat battery. You go ahead, I'll repeat the question.
Making everyone slaves through their media, etc. Just what you said about Jesus bankrupting the money changers.
Yep.
Obviously, I know that at the moment we still have to use banks. How do you see wealth being transferred from institutions that are corrupt like that to believers for just use?
Okay, so that's a good question. I 100% agree that the banks are thugs, and I've had a lot of experience with that. I have massive battles with our banks some years ago, and we won them, which is amazing. The Lord was there. But, we decided we needed to actually take on the banking system, so compete with them with a different model. And we decided, this is, my credit committee and we own 5 finance companies in our group, and we decided to consolidate them all into one, because they all do the same thing these days. And so if we can consolidate them into one and look at how do we structure it differently to how the banks are structured. So banks are typically, most banks, especially all the big ones, are structured in so much as obviously they have their hierarchy and their management, then they have their shareholders and they have their clients. Everything is done in favor of the shareholders at the expense of the clients. Clients get ripped off on purpose, deliberately as a strategy to help shareholders who own it and to pay obscene amounts of money to the people who can achieve that. So you're incentivized to rip that person off to pay that one and make lots of money. You're a temple priest. Okay? It's a Babylonian goat nation model. So we said, well, why don't we have a bank with no shareholders? Okay? Because you can make money out of the money that's put in the bank. You don't have to have, it's unsustainable to rip one person off for the benefit of another. It's always going to collapse, as I've said in the beginning. So we formed a bank. It's a Hong Kong-based company, or Hong Kong licensed company that is in Singapore. And we did this because we wanted to form a business guy and myself, where we would own the bank. We'd be the only shareholders, and we don't want dividends. So we will never ever exploit the people who put money in the bank for dividends to pay shareholders, because we don't need the dividend, but B, and biggest thing of all, we can make money out of the money they put in the bank, which is what we're supposed to do. And out of that money, because there's no one else to pay, we can say to them, guys, we can give you a much, much bigger return. In Europe, they're negative interest rates. You put your money in the bank in Japan, it costs you money to put your savings there. Okay? And that's not going to change for a long time, and so on. Well, we can say to them, you can deposit with us your yen. Okay? We're one of the biggest customers for National Australia Bank in our region, if not the biggest, and we have awesome exchange rates, we have awesome hedging rates, and so on. We can take your money, we can convert it into Australian dollars, a much better economy than yours. Yours is bigger, yours is number 3 economy in the world, but ours is a much better one, much better. And we can exchange it, even if we invested in the Australian property market or into Paladin or into anything, it's going to do much better than what you can do leaving it in your bank. And we can hedge it at the right price and so on. We can still give you at least 3 or 4% per annum hedge, so it's still in yen from your perspective, one of the best banks in the world. And we have a history of paying 17% for 19 years and never ever missing a payment and so on. So it's easy to create something that competes with the banks. Now, sovereign currencies can't last, okay? Fiat currencies can't last in the long term. So there's a little bit of background. because currencies are, and national currencies or sovereign currencies like your Kiwi dollar, our Aussie dollar, US dollar, all they are based on is confidence in the economy of that country. So nothing is pegged, it's not pegged to gold anymore. That was gone in the 70s. The only bank in the world is the Bank of Lebanon, because it has to be, because no one will deal with them, because it was a war zone. Okay? But the point is, so as people lose confidence in various currencies, the currencies start to fall apart. They just go down and down. And the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, obviously, and people are losing confidence in that all the time, because the US can't even pay the interest on its loans. Okay, they just keep lifting their debt ceiling, and people are losing confidence. So ultimately, the sovereign currencies will die out, and more than likely be replaced with digital currencies. Okay, so I'm not talking Bitcoin, I'm not saying invest or anything, because I'm talking about transactional currencies, not speculative currencies. They will be speculators, because that's how people are. But the point is, with a digital currency, you know how many dollars there are, but you don't know how many US dollars there are, so you can't put a value on it. And if I came to Pastor Bruce and I said, hey, geez, that's an awesome jacket there, Bruce, can I have it? I'll give you $1,000. And Bruce says, yeah, I can do it with $1,000, I'm going to buy a new jet ski. So I give him 1,000 Zimbabwe dollars. And he looks at it and says, I don't know if I'm going to take that, because I don't think I can buy my jet ski with Zim dollars. So he's got no confidence in the Zim dollar. If I come with Aussie dollars, he's going to take the Aussie dollars. Yeah, they're all right. It's the same thing. That's what's going on in a lot of these. People are losing confidence in various currencies. So ultimately, that's going to, we're talking about banking, it's going to disrupt the banking system. It should have been, we talk about a transformation of wealth and so on, that should have happened long time ago. It should have happened in 2007, we fixed it with more debt. Then came the bail-in system in the banking, where nobody, during the GFC, the banks were bailed out by reserve banks, which means governments were bailing them out. Governments don't own the reserves, but they transact through them. So they increased all the debt. After that, they realized they could never be able to do that again. So they said, from now on, banks bail themselves in. So if a bank starts to fail, it must confiscate the deposits that people have put in, okay, and reduce on it and default on its bonds. So that's what banks were supposed to do. They tested it in Cyprus, I think maybe 2011 or 12, and it worked beautifully. There was rioting and fuss in the streets and everything, but actually the banks confiscated anything over $160,000 on any deposit. They confiscated it. Okay, and eventually it all settled down. No one cared, because it was dirty Russian money anyway, but that was a great experiment. After that, they said, from now on, all banks, your banks in New Zealand were the last ones to join. You're a recalcitrant bunch of people. You wouldn't join. So the central banks of the world said, well, from now on, we're just going to charge you so much for your wholesale funding, so you had to join. We weren't far behind. So 2017, that's what was supposed to happen. 2017, 2 Italian bank and 1 Spanish bank failed. No one heard a peep about bail-in or bail-out or anything. Germany put some money in the European Central Bank, and they refunded those banks. So my point is, it's all manipulated at the moment, but you can't manipulate it forever. And at some point, that system will change. Those people who have proper banks, where you don't have shareholders, where you have people that are actually making money out of the money, which is the entire closed circuit transaction, those banks will survive. And then we will see the Babylonian banks land in a heap. Here comes the guy.
Following on from the question just asked, I'm a business person. In 2007, I was working in the gold industry amongst all the other companies that I own, and I was fascinated about the subject of Jubilee, about the cancelling of debt, and so not trying to speak or say anything about that, but rather jumping straight forward. I felt personally at the time the kingdom of God is not built on debt. I got quite passionate about that. I got myself out of debt completely. Yep. I became a lender to people. But in order for my business to prosper, I've found myself being dragged back into the same mire. So here we are with SDR, special drawing rights, as the next potential system of control. A bankrupt global system that you've mentioned, the $1 trillion. I'm pretty familiar with all the stuff and the stats. Yep. So it seems to me, aren't we going from one system of control to another system of control, because no one wants to forgive each other's debt. No one wants to let the slaves go free. Nobody wants to let the land lie fallow. Nobody wants to observe the principles of Jubilee. Yeah. And it seems to me 07 was just, I follow it very closely. I'm up to my eyeballs with this stuff. Yeah. And so moving forward, as we go to a system of control, the return of Christ, and bigger subjects, which obviously many pastors here will know more all about than I do, but really money is created in the fractional reserve banking system, the 1 to 9. It is not just about the deposits.
Exactly.
That is only a small percentage.
Yep.
So I don't want to go any longer on the question. I'm interested in your ideas about the next financial system and how it relates to believers, and also just your subject of debt, how believers should approach it, given the fact that people like me in business have to embrace it almost, whether I like it or not, in order to be a good employer of 50-odd people and multiple companies and all the other stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. So let's go to the second question first. So the business of debt. There's debt and there's debt. There's good debt and bad debt. It'd be nice if everybody was out of debt altogether, but if you're borrowing for a fridge, it's a depreciating asset. And you don't pay it off and it's gone. Well, then you've got bad debt. If you're funding your honeymoon and you're borrowing for it, that's another asset that just flies out the door and so on. So those are just examples. In my mind, Christian mum and dad debt level is too high, and there are lots of people who teach on it, and it should be gone. But for entrepreneurs, is a whole different world, okay? Because like our company, for example, is valued, the last time we had it valued, it was over 900 million by the accountants, and that was before we launched Cradle Software, which is a massive company. So it's well over $1 billion value. We carry about $97 million worth of investor capital. We borrow from the public. We don't issue shares, okay, deliberately, because I don't want the public to actually have a say what we do with the profit, because we need to fund the kingdom. So they're not shareholders, but we give them a serious amount of interest on the loans that we borrow. Okay, so it's a different, counterintuitive again, but to us that's debt. But it's a LTV or loan-to-value ratio of 1 in 10. Okay, 10%. So the risk to the investors is quite low. If we defaulted and they foreclosed, which they're fully entitled to do, you could fire sell Paladin for $500 million in a heartbeat. And there's only $97 million worth of debt. So that kind of debt, to me, is not an issue. There's cash flow issues because you've got to pay interest, and that, and quarterly that comes to quite a bit. But to me, I don't care about it. I'm not putting people who's going to land in a heap and trash families or anything like that. So there's debt and there's debt. To answer your question on business, I think businesses, if you're borrowing money in your business, structure it in a way that you actually don't have to pay it if you can't. So such a thing as, for example, redeemable shares, redeemable preference shares. I don't know the New Zealand Corporations Act, but I know the Aussie Corps Act, and I would say they're very, very similar because we're both British-based. So you can have a company and you can issue redeemable, let's say they're preference shares, just to encourage people to come in. So senior shares to yours, but no voting rights. Okay, but they are redeemable at a point in time that you determine. And they attract a coupon, so that means they have an interest component. So interest on shares can only be paid out of profit. So there's no profit, you don't have to pay them. Okay, so you're safe. But they're redeemable, so you're not stuck with shareholders forever. So you can put a time on it. You nominate the coupon. We've capped ours at 17%, which is massive, but we're able to do that. You might cap it at 8%. So anything first, there's a dividend to be declared. They get the first 8%. Everything else is yours. Okay, and you can buy their shares back for $1. Shares never go up or down in value. It's always $1, and that's completely legal to do that. And if you think that through, your debt is then easily manageable. They obviously, people have to take the risk when they buy shares. Our job's to make sure and look after them as best we can. Let me give you an example of from the other side of it. Okay, you're talking about different systems that are controlling and so on and whatnot. We have to. We have to get in and take over these systems. This is what the 7 Mountain philosophy is. We need to rise to the top and do stuff in there and change things. There's so many Christians that have been to the top of the banking system and done nothing. Even in Australia, the Reserve Bank governor, a strong Christian at one point not long ago, and did nothing, just spoke at a few venues. Okay, but he never changed anything. So we've got to have people that are thinkers that can rise up through these ranks and change things and bring that culture up with them and come up with ideas. And when you come up with ideas like we're doing with our bank, for example, okay, that's just one idea. But if your whole culture is based on caring and sharing, you never come up with ratty ideas that are going to plunder people or put people into such controlling places that wealth becomes centralized. All right. So, and also, as wealth becomes centralized, if you're doing it properly, because wealth will always centralize, because some people have a bigger gifting than others to create wealth, but everybody needs to prosper along the way. And if I can give you just, guys, a quick example. So we've got a women's health club in Canberra, in our capital city. We live on the sunny coast, but the club's there. Big 5-star health club. And it came one day, I haven't told the story today, have I? No. I don't have memory. Okay, so, but it's time now, is because we're talking about transformation, we're talking about the system, the thinking, and so on. In our region, so we're a franchise, we're a franchisee of the big Fernwood franchisor, and it's a upmarket 5-star women's health club. So just down the road, there's another women's health club from a different franchise, and it's going broke, so we've heard. So my wife, Merlin, she's the MD of the club. She comes to me and says, what are we going to do? What should we do with this lady? So I said to her, why don't you go and offer her this much for a club, generous amount for her club. We don't want her club, it's a ratty club. Ours is a nice 5-star club, but we want her members. Okay, because we know we can make money out of the members, repeat year after year after year, joining. So let's offer her heaps of money. And she's so Merlin goes and makes friends. She comes back and says, oh, she doesn't want to sell, nice lady. So I said, okay, no problem. Merlin says, you ever change your mind? Here we are. She comes back 6 months later, heavily pregnant, desperate, crying, so distressed. Everything was all very sad. The landlord has locked the door. She can't get in. The members can't get in. The creditors can't get their money. The landlord's not getting paid. Everybody in the whole... every stakeholder is distressed. She comes to us. She says, you can buy my club now for this much. I just have to get out of it. I've got to go and have my baby. I can't cope. So what are we going to do? What is the natural thing for us to say? Yeehaw, God is good. I had to pay that much, but I can get it for this much. Is that right? Yeah, but it's not God. That's Babylon. That is the greed. In a transformation, this is the just, okay? So this is so important in the whole financial system. We have to understand, because we're talking capital here. So Merlin comes to me and says, what should we do now? Because she's got a heart for women, and she's also a mum, and she's just thinking, this poor girl is having a baby, she's got no money, so everyone's going to jump on her, they're going to auction her baby off. So that's Merlin's outlook. I'm a little bit more academic on things. And so she says, so what do we do now? So I said, our job is everyone shall prosper, all shall prosper. Jesus is caring and sharing in the marketplace. So therefore, go back and offer her the same amount of money that we offered 6 months ago, okay? Because we don't care, we don't want the club, okay? Remember, all shall prosper. We've got to prosper too, otherwise it's unsustainable, not just giving, okay? So go and offer her the same amount of money. And then you say to her, we will pay the landlord out. We'll pay out your lease, because it's no good just paying you money and no one can open the doors. We need some of that ratty equipment because it's a special circuit thing. So we will pay out all of your landlord. We'll pay out all of your other creditors, which we didn't offer the last time. Okay, she's in distress. Our job is to look after. You want transformation of wealth? You'll look after the people it came from and change them to the one true God. So we said, okay, we will pay you this much, we'll pay out all of your debts, we'll pay out all of your creditors, your landlord and everything. And so what we actually want from you is your members and a little bit of your ratty gear, but we want your members. So your job is to get on the phone. This is the lady, the pregnant lady. You get on the phone, you phone everybody that ever walked through your door, and you send them to us. And I don't care who it is, whoever walked through. And also the members that are there, that have got, remember, they are also distressed, okay? They're our responsibility. So now they have got residual membership that they've paid for, they pay annually. So they can come to our club, they can work off that membership for free until it's in. And we know that our girls are going to love them to death, and they're going to upsell them, and they'll be part of the family forever. So we will pay them that. And every time you send us 10 people, we'll pay you for every one you send, over and above that much, over and above the creditors. This is God's gleaning principles in the modern market. You send us, we'll pay you for every member. When you get to 10, the next 10 will pay you a margin more, and the next 10 a margin more, and so on and so on. You know what? She wasn't a very good club manager, that's why it went down the drain, but she's a really good saleswoman. And she's on the phone, and she sent so many members and members and members to our club. I just lost track of who's coming from her and who's coming from our sales efforts, But the point being, those girls join our club in their hundreds, and they just sign on every year, year after year. Our attrition is very low. And yet she went away prosperous, and she was able to have a calm baby, a calm birth, and everything else. And today, I think it's like 9 years later, she's still one of our greatest advocates in the marketplace. So that's a transformation of the wealth. And that is a whole culture that we need to apply when we're talking banking. If we had people, Christians, rising up through the banking system with that type of cultural mindset, caring and sharing, we would change all of that. The policy would be formed on that, based on the culture. People, profit, planet, with an overarching culture of caring and sharing. Here comes your mic.
Repeat the question, but just
just looking at eschatology in the Bible, we see a lot of signs in our current world, and I think the banking system is definitely one of those impending signs. About there's in America, obviously, there's globalism versus nationalism, and the Bible talks of a one world government and a system that. So, how do you see that playing into what you're talking about now? Where we all, as Christians, if you believe in biblical eschatology, we know that's coming down the track. So what's our response to that?
Yeah. Okay, that's another good question. America, they had this doctrine going through, this rapture doctrine. I'm there a lot. Like one time, I think I was there about 8 times in 1 year, and it's thousands of people we're talking to. And I see it all over the States. There's this rapture doctrine, where they think that, on Monday the 18th at 4 p.m. God's coming, Jesus is coming back, and we're all gone, so why should we do anything? Why should we bother? But that's not what the Bible says. And every time they've done that, it went past that date and someone had to commit suicide or do the Jones Brigade and everyone takes poison or something. But at the end of the day, the Bible doesn't say that. So if we look at the Matthew 24 that I mentioned right in the beginning, this is Jesus talking about the end times to the disciples. They're asking him, when is this going to happen? Jesus describes the whole of stuff. When's this going to happen? So Jesus tells him, when everybody hates each other, your brother's going to hate you, you're going to this, that, and everything's going to go bad, be cyclones and whatever. But only after all of that, when the gospel of the kingdom has been taught throughout the earth from testimony. Okay, so the Americans are thinking the gospel of salvation. It doesn't say the gospel of salvation. The gospel of salvation was taught throughout the earth almost everywhere quite a long time ago. Okay, it's not reaching everywhere now because it's all been shut down. But the point is, the gospel of the kingdom hasn't been taught, and it definitely hasn't been taught from testimony, from proof. So the gospel of the kingdom is a relatively new understanding. It shouldn't be, but the proper way that it works, like I'm teaching you today, and like other marketplace ministries around the world are now teaching, is the gospel of the kingdom. Okay, we've always been taught generic Christianity. So that has not been taught around the world. So we don't have to say, okay, we can say, yes, we're living in end times. Keep in mind, they said they were living in end times 2,000 years ago. So whatever your timeline is for end times is open to definition. But the Bible says until the gospel of the kingdom, because it's the gospel of the kingdom that will get people properly saved. Okay, the gospel of salvation is awesome, but unless we teach them stuff and so on, they're just a bunch of hypocrites. They just go back and do the same thing, and there's no distinction between the one who got saved on Sunday and the two crooks on the Monday. So I don't think the end times are here yet. We've got lots and lots of work, and there's no reason for us to sit and do nothing. This is where the Americans go wrong. And they're starting to figure it out now, by the way. I used to go there. They invite me to come and talk. They say, you've got an hour. So I go there to talk. Okay, now I'm traveling, for us to go to the States and back, there's 2 days each way, and you've got to be there, and you've got to defrag and talk to these massive audience. They're all leaders. They all have huge networks. You're really talking to 1 million people when you're talking to some of these audiences. And then they allow the spirit to move in their mind, and they're all rolling around on the floor, the same as Australia and probably New Zealand was doing like 22 years ago. It's almost like the Toronto blessing is happening again at these big conferences. So they're all doing all the stuff on the floor, and then they get up and they say, 5 people, sorry guys, we've used up your time that you were going to talk. And Dave, you've got 15 minutes. So I don't want another gig. I don't like being out the front. I'm not looking for airtime, but I look at this and I think you guys haven't got a clue. During that time, how many little 12-year-old girls got screwed by 20 men? And now you never fixed a thing. You can do that on Sunday night. You don't have to do that when you invited world leaders here to come and talk on how do we fix the problems. So that is the US Pentecostal mindset and even the evangelical mindset, a lot of it. That we're just going to get raptured tomorrow. We don't need to do anything. Let's just keep worshiping so we can go in glory. There's a glory train coming. Yeah, it's a fact. And it used to drive me off my face, you know. That guy, Dr. Byron Gilfillan, he runs the biggest online video Bible college in the world, over 20,000 campuses. And he came to me one day, and I was given 15 minutes out of an hour's talk. This was up in Connecticut, I think. And, you know, so I took the 15 minutes, I just gave them both barrels. I was like, I don't care, you know. And I just really put them all on the spot. And I didn't expect to ever get invited back, and I didn't care. It's not worth spending 10 grand in 5 days just to and do 15 minutes, you know. So I gave them both barrels. He was in the audience. He's a South African guy, and I didn't know he's there. He came to me after. He said, that we need to hear in this country, and I need that in my Bible college. And he said, I need to know more. So we chatted because we were on the bus to and fro the conference, and I was stuck there for 4 days anyway. So we chatted, and he kept hounding me, you've got to come because it's an online video college, and we want to film your lectures. I hate being filmed. This was like 6 years ago, I think. And I was ducking and weaving and trying to get out of it. Anyway, he said, next time you're in the States, stop in LA, come to our studio. I said, yep, no worries. And every time I just avoided LA and flew out of Dallas. I just didn't want to go. Okay, but another, some years later, he chased me for 2 years because he could see what was wrong with the doctrine and the stuff going on in the States. And he eventually, he said, I was lecturing at some other big conference somewhere, and he just brought the whole studios up. And he took over like the hotel, and they said, now you're not getting away. So I had to go into there between our lectures and did 6 lectures for him. And then he got all the other speakers, Lance Wallnow and all the heavyweights that were there to come and add their lectures. And he created a marketplace module out of it. Okay, and now, today, he's translating the KR website into Spanish. And there are millions of Hispanic people and so on. So even in America, you know, last year, I think about 3 million in Florida watched our stuff. So the point I'm making is that the US is now starting to get hit by sensible marketplace ministry, and they're starting to realize we've got to stop groveling on the floor and get up and do what Jesus did on the ground, because we've articulated that in the hardest possible way to break through their doctrines. Again, I'm not big noting us. I'm just saying it needed to be fixed. They need to hear the stuff. So it's changing. So I think end times, we need to know about it, but guys, it's not coming the day after tomorrow. There's so much of the gospel of the kingdom needs to be not only taught from testimony. Testimony means it's happened. Proving it, empirical data. Anybody else, ladies and gentlemen? Can I go and have a glass of wine on the plane home? Oh, don't ask. Don't. Bad question. I don't know. I've never ever taught on balance. I always get asked that. But I literally have 4 hours. So I come up to midnight. I get up at 4 a.m. every day. We set up Paladin to fund our church, as you heard in my testimony. You were right for 6-figure check. So I set the company up for that. As soon as we had done that, the Lord said, good, well done, good and faithful servant, next. And he expanded it. And so I thought, okay, now we have to fund public policy, and I'm happy with that. I'm like, mindset, good, let's do that. And so we're doing all of that. We built the company a bit bigger, and we budgeted our time and just everything to build a company to strategically and covertly do stuff. If I told you some of the stuff we did, I can't, but if I did, you would be blown away of how we've restaffed embassies around the world and all sorts of things to change who comes in, all sorts of funny stuff we've done because we can work at very high levels. And I love that, awesome. And then came this terrible day when the Lord said, I want you to go and counsel the kings. Okay, and I had 3 prophetic words in a row. I didn't know the kings were. I mean, it was Prince Harry and Prince William. Am I going to get an audience with them? What will I say? But anyway, when I learned it's the business people, I thought, oh, no, I don't want to do this. And so I made a deal. Don't make a deal with God. Never works. And I said to the Lord, I will do this because don't stand me down again. So I didn't want to be disobedient, but I'm never going to promote, never going to build a website, never going to volunteer. And it was like the Lord was saying, sweet. And I said, but if people ask, I will go. Well, that was a stupid thing. So it grew and grew and grew. And so that threw us out of balance because we never budgeted to run a ministry. Okay, and because I had the dumb attitude that it's going to go away, okay, Lord, have I done enough? Can we do something else now? Jet ski ministry or something. But it kept growing. So that was why we went so far out of balance. And my wife just says to me, you have, when will your teeth wear out? Her favorite expression is you bite off so much and chew like hell. But that's what we had to do. The demand was there, and the unreserved obedience was there, because I could see the vision of what needed to be achieved and how massive it is. And I'm a high energy person, so I don't want to watch, she wants to watch Escape to the Country and things like that, English TV. So I don't want to do that. So I'd rather change the world. So, but I don't know about balance. I mean, we're close. Been through wars together, been through everything together. We've got 5 kids, 8 grandkids. 1 great grandchild is 2 next week, and so on. We're in touch. We talk twice a day, no matter where we are. I always invite her everywhere I go. She's as flat out as I am. She's managing a big health club, all the finances, the Paladin group, and so on. And she's the super mum who loves all the kids and grandkids, and everyone's all around her. So, and she hates the way I travel. Like next week I'm in Dubai for about 4 hours. Fly all the way there, do a lecture, and out. And then maybe London soon after that, 9 hours. And so she can't cope with that kind of travel, so she doesn't come. But we're still really close, and we work together, and we're always in touch. But balance is not even in the English dictionary in my...
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for today.
You're
It's
welcome.
definitely blessed me. One question for me is abortion for me is a big thing.
Abortion, yep.
Yeah. And when you're talking about greed and being self-centered, how does that play a part in different countries, and
Yeah.
how can that be? Because I was thinking, what could be the root cause of that?
Yeah.
And how can that be stopped?
Yeah, good. Okay, so how can we deal with abortion? What's the root cause and so on? If you were the enemy and you wanted to attack God's value system and his values, you would go after the children. You would make the parents kill their children. And you see this over and over and over and over again in the Bible. And every time it happens, God reacts very aggressively. Okay, so we don't have time to go through all of them, but if you just take into account, first instruction to Adam, be fruitful and multiply. Okay, so have children, because I need to fill this up. That all fell into the Babylonian economy and got wiped out. 1.8 billion people are drowned in the flood. Very first thing, Noah, be fruitful and multiply. Righteousness again, let's start again and populate the earth again. The next milestone perhaps is Moses in Egypt, okay? The Jews know they are supposed to have children, because that's the value system. So they have lots of children, so they outbreed the Egyptians. The Egyptians are like, this is a threat. Let's enslave them and stop them, okay? And as soon as the Pharaoh starts to kill the children, suddenly God's active and says, hang on a second, woohoo, can't have this. It was a selected program of culling the males, okay? Because they were the threats. A whole different work ethic, all sorts of things going on. The Egyptians are very opulent living. You just cast your mind back to Joseph. Remember, he double taxed them 20% in the 7 years of plenty, right? And that was so much money that it trashed the Egyptian accounting system. Remember that? 20% of how much? So what happened to the other 80%? What happened to the other 80%? That was 4 times as much as trashed the biggest accounting economy in the world. The Egyptians had it and blew it. They blew it within 2 years. When the famine started, they were coming back and having to buy food, and then they had no more money to buy the food, then they ended up getting enslaved, and so on and so on. So that was their natural, that was how they lived. They could not cope with these guys outbreeding them and so on. So they started to kill the kids, and Moses and the bulrushes and so on. And that's why the Exodus started. Immediately going across the desert, what happens? The Amalekites come to kill the kids. Okay, the Amalekites came from Esau. You shall live by the sword. They were the wildest, they were the SAS of the day. They're plundering those deserts. They also owned a big chunk of the promised land, by the way. And they had a meeting in the promised land while Moses is bringing these guys across the desert. We cannot have them outbreeding us like they did in Egypt. That was the problem. Kill the kids. Okay, so they go around the back and they start killing all the stragglers, the women and the children. They set about trying to make the women infertile. That was part of their assault. Anyway, eventually they get fed up and they come around the front. And then, of course, you have Moses and Joshua at the Battle of Rephidim. And he says, go and kill them. And he says to Moses, after that battle, you tell Joshua, when they get in the promised land, they wipe them out, because there's a whole lot of them left in the promised land. He said, kill that lot forever, because they're trying to kill the kids. So this is background to why, and this happens over and over and over. When Jesus was born, Herod, perfectly healthy for 37 years as a ruler, And he says, let's go and kill these kids. There's someone who's going to take over because he's going to threaten my wealth. Okay, immediately within 6 months he's dead. He died of one of the most putrid diseases. He's rotted. He was trying to stab himself to kill himself, and his cousin was holding the knife all the time. It was going on, and so God just said, "No one's killing these kids." So there it is. And so this is the whole fundamental basis of why we must not do abortions. You know, not only just on an economic basis. If you get the reason. It's happening. The enemy wants this to go on. So he repackages it so that we don't see what's going on. They repackage it as choice for women so that, you know, why are you telling me what to do with my body and all this sort of stuff, okay? Everything that you see around you these days is repackaged into something shiny so that we can now accept it. But right under that is the effort to wipe out the faith, to wipe out the kingdom of God. Mankind is always trying to be independent of God. Always. Lucifer, I want to be like God. Adam and Eve, Adam, yep, I'll be like God, let's eat from this tree. Devil said, do you want to be like God? He said, yep, eat. And that's the same thing all the way through. So you look at now fertility rates. Fertility rates for natural reproduction is 2.1. Some people think it's 2.3. 2.1 is close enough. Europe, in the EU, it's 1.35 at the moment. You cannot reproduce yourself. Okay, so this is why we are outbred by competing faiths. They have the understanding we must have children. We would rather abort them so that we can have a better, easier lifestyle. It costs too much, you know, and so on. It's just about always a self-centered thing. Why? It's my body. You know, it always comes back to that same thing. And it's unbelievable how we as Christians don't contest this in a logical, strategic way. Are we done? Did you enjoy today, ladies and gents? I only went halfway through.
Dave, thank you. It's just been great, hasn't it? I don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight, but I'll have a go. No, that was just so inspiring. Thank you. I've talked to some who probably are as inspired at anything that you've said just by the lifestyle of a day of intimacy a week, communion once a day, just some really great principles. I think we've all been stretched and grown and are so blessed by having you here. So thank you. I'm going to, just before I close in prayer, I did mention if you would be willing and want to just sort of say thank you for the day. I've put the bank account numbers for the church there. You can just take a photo. Any money that's put in will go directly to KI just to increase the work that's going on. Would love to do that. So there is details of that. Feel free to do that if you want to. Otherwise, it's just been an absolute delight to have you here. Thank you for the time you've given. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the way that we've been stretched. We know that we've heard a word that's for now. This is the right time for us to talk about these things, to learn about these things. And so we just thank you for today. Lord, equally, we thank you for your servant. We just really are so grateful for that which you have implanted and put it into our brother so that he can come and deliver what he's delivered today. We pray you'd keep opening doors that no one can close for him, and increase the effectiveness, but also the profile of this message. So Lord, we just really pray for that blessing in Jesus' name. And now finally I pray for these beautiful people. Pray that, Lord, everything that you've wanted to sow in hearts will be fallen into good soil, and it will bring into produce a harvest. So I bless each one in Jesus' name. Send us forth on our journey, our assignment, in Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen. Let's put our hands together one more time for our brother. God bless you. So Dave has to head to the airport, so please don't all besiege him, or it's a long swim back to the Sunshine Coast.
For by his mercy, my life as the eyes begin to open and the blindness meets the light. If you have soul, sing. I see the world in light. I see the world in wonder. I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. Have you ever seen the